and welcome to this episode of Miracle Conversations. It's August of 2022, and I'm here with Dr. Dave Asomaning. And in this call, we like to talk about miracle mindsets. My name is Brittany New, and I'm an entrepreneur living in Barcelona, Spain. And every year we have a different theme. Last year, the theme was forgiveness. This year, the theme is love. And so for this episode, we're going to be talking about love in terms of one of the lessons from A Course in Miracles. So in each episode, we talk about a different lesson from A Course in Miracles. Most of the time, sometimes we repeat messages that have lessons that have more to talk about, like the past few months. But this one is a new one, lesson number 127, which says, "There is no love but God's." So Dave is going to break that down for us and tell us all that we can extract from this lesson in the little time we have together. I'm sure there's lots more we could talk about, infinite amount. But Dave, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and lead us into the lesson?
Fantastic, Brittany. Good to be with you again for our August call, and thank you for that intro. I am an executive coach and I live in Florida. I specialize in supporting CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, and other leaders to develop miracle mindsets. And it's my experience that miracle mindsets lead to improved effectiveness, ease, and fulfillment in the professional and personal lives of the leaders I work with. So, as Brittany, you mentioned, this whole endeavor here with this show, this monthly call, is all about supporting our audience to refine and strengthen miracle mindsets for themselves and the people they love and work with. So on the personal side and on the professional side. And Brittany, also thank you for mentioning our themes for each of the recent years, this year and last year. And you and I have been kicking around the idea of a theme for this next year, 2023, and I think we're pretty settled on the topic miracles. In the 12 years or so I've been doing this process, not all on YouTube this way and through the podcast, but in the 12 years I've been doing this process, we haven't actually done miracles yet. So I'm excited you introduced that, Brittany, to me as a possibility. And then the new cycle for 2023 actually starts in November. So we've got September and October, 2 more shows for the theme of love for 2022. I like to start the new cycle 2 months before the new year, just to get us in the mind of the new year, actually a little ahead of time, before the holidays descend on us. So yeah, we've also had an anchor lesson, lesson 50, for this year, which says, "I am sustained by the love of God." And then there's a paraphrase sentence in that lesson that I really like a lot too. It goes like this: "Through the love of God within me, I can resolve all seeming difficulties without effort and ensure confidence." And I found myself this past month really focusing on the without effort and ensure confidence part. And even more in this last week and in these last few days, finding myself really resonating to that. This idea that the love of God inside of us will help us to overcome every seeming difficulty easily and confidently, basically. All right, so just a few more things, and then we'll get into the lesson for today. As you indicated, Brittany, it's lesson 127. Looking forward to that. So just a few more things. So if you're in our audience and you'd like to know how to put all of this together in the coaching method I use, there's a systematic, step-by-step, self-paced, self-guided way to do the whole thing through my book, Nightmares to Miracles. That's available on Amazon, and we usually have a link to it in the show notes. And then one additional note about the book. I think we're also going to, in 2023, we're going to start taking each of the chapters of that book as a cornerstone for each of our calls. So that I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a different approach. There'll be an ACIM lesson, of course, but we'll also delve into each of the chapters. So, Brittany, I'm excited about that for us in this next year. So, I wanted to also let everyone in the audience know how helpful, Brittany, you've been to me over the last several years. We started working together with you helping me beautify some of my worksheets that I used in my coaching calls with clients, and then you helped me get my course organized into the audio and video modules. And then you've been helping me with this show now. And so I'm a really big fan of yours. And I want everybody to know how amazing you are and how powerful the work that you do is. So before we get to the lesson, Brittany, why don't you say a bit more about what you do for our audience?
Thank you. Thank you, as always, for giving me the space to talk about what I do a little bit. But I say I'm an entrepreneur, but my basically two main, businesses here. I've got graphic design, and I've also got this YouTube channel where I'm kind of influencing a little bit in the millennial tech space in terms of design and media production, stuff like that. So I've worked with Dave as a graphic designer and beautifying his course, as he said. And I also do branding. I'm getting more into branding as a high value service that more people have been demanding in logo design. But I still do presentations and help with videos and even things like this. If anyone watching also has content that they want to put out every month and want someone to kind of bounce ideas off of and put it out there more efficiently. And then on the YouTube side, I've got my own channel, and I just kind of do tutorials about my graphic design stuff there. You can find more on my website, brittany.com. And I recently launched an Instagram account for my design business, which is Be New Media. That's the company name. My last name is New, so Be New Media is the company.
Excellent, Brittany. And I don't know if you want people knowing this out there or not. You can edit it out if you don't, but one of the enormous time-saving, amazing things you do in our work together is you do all the video production and editing from the raw footage of this show or call. You distribute the content to a blog, a written post. You also distribute it to just an audio post, right? And each of those is so useful. Some people want to watch the video action between us, right? Some people want to listen while they do other things. And then some people want to quickly skim through a written version of everything and not have to go through either video or audio. And every month, again, for almost 2 years now, you have done this amazing work on behalf of my brand, and this is one of the main sources of content push out, and it's been a lifesaver. So again, if that's not something you want people to inundate you with requests for, I get it, but it's been a lifesaver for me. So I'm celebrating that for sure.
No, I really enjoy this. Thank you. Yeah, I'm available for those services as well. This is a really nice interactive thing to do. I guess when I do graphic design and YouTube, it's just me alone all the time. So this is a really fun addition to the work that I do independently. So I really enjoy, especially doing it with you, but also if anyone else has a similar project they'd like to start and collaborate on, I'd be happy to do that too.
Fantastic. Great. All right. So that's for the preliminaries. We're about to get into lesson 127 itself. The headline is There is No Love But God's. And I'll read a few sections from the lesson and comment. And then one of the things I really love that we do on our call, Brittany, is that we try to provide some application for our audience, and then some calls to action too. So here we go with the first paragraph of this lesson. It says, perhaps you think that different kinds of love are possible. Perhaps you think there is a kind of love for this, a kind of love for that, a way of loving one, another way of loving still another. And yet love is one. It has no separate parts and no degrees, no kinds, nor levels, nor divergences, nor distinctions. It is like itself, unchanged throughout. It never alters with a person or circumstance. It is the heart of God and also of his Son. Now, again, I always try to disclaim the somewhat gendered language here of his Son, of his child, more inclusive. The heart of God could substitute heart of spirit, heart of higher mind, whatever you'd like. We are not fussing over here about most of these technical terms. We want to be as inclusive as possible. But bottom line from this paragraph, if we didn't do anything else from this lesson, this is a lot right here to unpack. So one of the things I want to say really quickly about this is that I know a lot of people are familiar, for instance, with distinctions that are made about love using Greek terminology, right? So for instance, there's eros, which is used to refer to sexual and erotic or even romantic love, right? The kind of chemistry that's involved there. So the Greek word eros refers to that type of love. Then in this classification system, you can have the Greek word, I guess you say, phileo, which is the word we get Philadelphia from, city of brotherly love. So this is really platonic love between people where there's great warmth and affection and caring and connection. But it's not erotic love or sexualized love. It's not romantic love. It's platonic love. Then you've got the Greek word that represents family love, storge, family love, right? So there's a kind of, usually there's a kind of loyalty around family and blood ties that excludes other people. Inheritance systems are usually based on storge, that kind of love. And then in this Greek classification system, you've got agape, which is unconditional love. And so that would be the closest thing, agape, to what's being referred to. And the only reason I look at that classification system is because for somebody who's mindful of that or aware of it, they'd be like, wait, okay, this paragraph you just read, that there are no different types of love, that doesn't make any sense. I know about this Greek system or other systems in which there are all these different types of love, right? So right away, we are thrust into this very non-dualistic world that the Course is always inviting us into, A Course in Miracles. When I say the Course, that's what I mean, right? Very non-dualistic. In other words, there is this zone of non-dualism in which the only thing that's actually real is agape or perfect unconditional love. That's the only thing that's real in the Course's metaphysics. Everything else that we experience that has divisions or variations or degrees is not real. And I always hasten to add, it's not real in the sense that it's like a movie or a dream, right? So when you're in a dream, things feel real in a dream, and we can get lost in a movie. But compared to this non-dualistic reality that the Course is always pointing to, the world of distinctions and degrees and so on is an illusion. It's not real. Okay, so let me pause here. There's more for us to get to, of course, but Brittany, any comments, reactions, questions, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'd heard of agape love. I didn't recognize all the other names that you said, but I've heard of this kind of Greek terminology that you mentioned. So I guess it's saying that, I mean, when I was younger, I remember my dad teaching me that love is a choice. It's not a feeling. It's not something that comes and goes. It's like I choose to love you. And I guess, does agape love, do you think that fits with that definition of it being a choice?
I do. I think it does fit with that, and we're going to discuss that even more um, in relation to the prodigal son story.
Oh, okay.
Right? You
Okay.
know, that's what I pull that out
I
quite
feel
a
like we talked
bit.
about it last week.
Right? I
Last month,
pull,
sorry.
yeah, I pull it out a lot because once for instance, when I started looking at this lesson in preparation for what we were doing, and I've been through the course several times. I've been through all the lessons, but I didn't really remember this lesson, and it didn't stand out for me. So it was a good review, and I was a bit disoriented. I was like, oh man, it's a lot of words and it seems repetitive, and I was having a hard time getting my bearings. And then with some meditation, Spirit guided me to just understand it in relation to Prodigal Son story. So once I did that, everything fell in place and it became crystal clear. The point I'm making in relation to what you said about your dad and what he told you about it being a choice, agape being a choice, is that in that story, um, the father, who is really the role model for the love we're trying to practice, makes a consistent choice to love his sons, and it could be daughters, and we're trying to be inclusive, even though the original story doesn't always seem that inclusive. The father makes in that story, or it could have been the mother, makes a choice to love unconditionally. And we're going to break that down some more. So it's definitely a choice. And we see how the other two characters in that story don't make the same choice. And it's very revealing as kind of not the way to go. And so we'll break that down some more for sure. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. All right, so let's go to the next section I want to highlight here. It says, this is sort of underscoring what I was saying earlier, that the metaphysics of the Course is trying to teach. It says, love is a law without an opposite. Its wholeness is the power holding everything as one. The link between the Father and the Son, which holds them both forever as the same, right? So, again, just emphasizing this idea that love actually ultimately has no opposite. It's one thing, it's reality, and any opposite it appears to have, such as hate or fear, of course, you typically positions a kind of dualistic opposite to love as fear, is an illusion, and therefore it actually doesn't exist, right? So now this can seem like semantics and we're just playing mind games, but at the end of the day, it becomes really, really powerful to understand this. There are technical reasons why it's important to understand that love is one thing with no opposite, right? So let's look a little bit at the prodigal son story and try to flesh this out with that story. It's usually, as I mentioned, my sort of the easiest way in for me. So a quick recap of the story. There's a father, he's wealthy, he has a kingdom, he's got two sons. The younger of the sons comes prematurely and demands his inheritance because he wants to go seek his fortune. And the father pleads with him to stay because he has everything he needs in the kingdom that he's a family member in. But he's like, no, give me my inheritance, give me my inheritance. The father is not able to persuade the son to stay, so he reluctantly gives him his inheritance. The son takes the inheritance, goes off into a far country, and eventually falls on hard times. He squanders his inheritance. There's a famine in the land. And it seems like the best he can do to provide for himself is to work as a very low-level assistant for a pig farmer. And he's having to resort to eating the food that he's supposed to be giving the pigs. So it's a pretty sad state of affairs. So at some point, he begins to reflect on his earlier life with his father, and he decides to get up and go back to his father's house. Now, his intention in going back is not to have the prerogatives of a son anymore because he's already squandered his inheritance. He's already spent what was coming to him. He no longer has those rights, technically or legally. But he sort of estimates that his father is so well off that he'll probably have work for him and he can make a better living than working for a pig farm. So he goes back home, long journey, dusty, he's tattered, he's in rags, he's a pitiful sight. And his father spies him from a distance, runs to embrace him, and just is beside himself with joy that his son has come back. And he stirs up the whole household and has them launch into a party for the son. And the older brother, who's been at home this whole time, faithfully working for the father, is upset about this. And he takes the father to task and describes what the father is doing, accuses the father as being completely unfair, right? Why are you treating this person who's disgraced us, hasn't achieved anything, has wasted resources, and has come back hat in hand? Why are you celebrating him while I've been here faithfully working for you all this time and you haven't had a party for me? So now this is where, as we interpret the story, this is where the idea that love is impartial comes into play, and that we want to work it into our psychologies, into our miracle mindsets, right? So essentially what the father says to the older brother is that he loves both of them equally. He doesn't love the younger one any more or less than he loves the older one. The reason for the appearance of a difference is that the younger one he thought was dead, but is now alive. He's come back. It's just an amazing miracle. And that for the older brother, he's always had the keys to the kingdom. He's always had everything. So he's not losing anything by the re-embrace of the younger brother. So maybe we'll jump to some application right now with this story fresh in our minds. So I typically, on the personal level and on the professional level with my clients, this issue shows up in very interesting ways. It's always very rewarding to work with clients around these two issues. So on the personal side, it can have to do with usually matters dealing with estates, wills, and things like that. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not to be construed as financial advice, but when you have blended families, people remarrying and things like that, you get a redistribution of wealth into new systems. And there's sometimes a prenup or all kinds of conditions about how the money is going to be distributed and so on. But this lesson with the leader who's open to it can be very, very powerful, right? About them taking a stand to exercise love from this agape position and treat everybody in their reconstituted family with a sort of impartial love, and not have favorites like, this is my original family and I'm partial to them, and you all, kind of the new folks, are second-class citizens in some kind of way. Now, the reason that this is important is because it actually leads to miracles somehow. Good, powerful, amazing things happen when the leader thinks this way. Now, it doesn't mean that the original family won't get a bigger financial share, or that there won't be a prenup or any of that. It doesn't mean, people do all kinds of different things to ensure that the wealth goes the way they want it to. Just like in our story, the father did give the son his inheritance, and while the younger son, while the older son had the whole sort of, in a sense, entitlement to the whole kingdom, right? So there can be differences in apportioning resources, but if the leader does what they're doing with a sense of the love of God, being this uniform, consistent standard for everybody without partiality, it just leads to a better set of outcomes for that leader. So that's on the personal side most of the time. On the professional side, let's say we're dealing with a very high-powered CEO, and I think I mentioned this the last time too. Everybody wants to be close to what I call the throne, right? So the CEO is the king or queen on the throne, and everybody wants to be like in with the king or the queen. And you see people jostling and jockeying, like, get out of my way. Like, I was here before you were. I've known this king long before you were even a midget on the face of the earth, whatever it is. There's just interesting jockeying. And again, if the leader adopts this idea that they're not going to play favorites and they're not going to play people against one another, we have the best time in the coaching process, right? Because a leader of this nature will bring it to the attention of the different people who are jockeying that it's understood that there's jockeying, and that's not the basis for the teamwork that's going on. It's just the most powerful thing to see it in operation. And I'll say the reason that it's so powerful, Brittany, is because usually people are attracted to one another, both on the personal side and the professional side, because of childhood wounds, right? And so what happens is that people then get into conflicts with leaders or sources of wealth and resources based on unresolved childhood wounds. So when we bring it to the attention of the different players in any scenario, that the dynamics of partiality that they're falling into, that the leader is resisting, are based on childhood wounds, and that even though the work isn't about therapy, I mean, we're building businesses and we want the businesses to be successful, it's not primarily a therapeutic endeavor. If the leader is mindful that people get into these partial arrangements or want to get into special arrangements based on childhood wounds, then their agape in the situation helps people heal. That's where the miracle breakthroughs start to come through. A leader who is not mindful of this will actually foster and encourage a kind of unhealthy competition, which is just accelerating the childhood wounds. All right, so there's a lot going on there, but let me pause here and see if you have any thoughts or reactions to any of that.
No, I mean, that's so interesting. It really makes sense as well, like what you're saying about the childhood wounds. I can imagine a situation where you just really butt heads with someone that, reminds you of, I don't know, the parent that you didn't get along with the most, and you showing them that unconditional love. Maybe you didn't have the chance to show that love to your parent at the time of the conflict, and it allows you to, I guess, get redemption or atonement even for that situation. So, yeah, that sounds miraculous.
It is. I mean, to see it in operation, and again, with a leader who's willing to be mindful of this and says, oh, I get it. I get it. So the term the Course uses for these types of preferential relationships is special relationships, right? Special relationships is a bit of a dirty word in this regard in the Course, right? So when it says, sorry, I almost dropped my thing over here. When it says that we want to avoid special relationships, what it's really getting at is that we want to avoid deifying human relationships and setting them on a kind of pedestal, which is a replacement for the divine unconditional love. So we don't want to confuse eros or phileo or storge for agape, which is a common mistake that people make. They get a hold of some eros and they want to make that into the divine, like ultimate, or they have a phileo and they want to make that the universal. So what we're doing is we are, by holding a position of agape, again, we don't use these terms per se, but by holding a position that is tantamount to agape, a mindful leader will prevent people from getting stuck in special relationships based on childhood wounds, as you summarize it so well. So a very exciting, powerful part of the work. So just a few more things from this lesson, and then we will have done our duty here in a good way. So, paragraph 5 says, no law the world obeys can help you grasp love's meaning. What the world believes was made to hide love's meaning and to keep it dark and secret. So, what this is again getting at is that the it's related to the non-dualistic metaphysics of the course again, right? So it's saying that everything we see in the manifest physical world is all part of a big nightmare that we're all dreaming, collectively and individually. And anything we see going on in the nightmare world is intended to seduce us into being more convinced about a world of degrees and partiality and steps and so on. And that what we're trying to do is wake up from that world into this non-dualistic world in which love is the only thing that exists and has any reality. So it's kind of warning us that to get enamored of things in the material world is to lose this power of unconditional, non-partial love. Again, it's a fine line to tread between sort of detesting the world, which is not what we want to do, but not being sucked in by it and its rules, which are the rules of the ego and are ultimately painful and destructive, right? So, and then we're in the world and trying to wake up from the nightmare that we're in. So, I'm aware that it's a fine line to walk, and there are a lot of nuances to it, for sure. But I did want to get this idea out that the world has some dangers to it that we want to be mindful of because of its rules and its hierarchies and so on. And they ultimately lead to a very unforgiving posture about things. So, for instance, in general, if one does something wrong according to a criminal code, one will be punished by the system of the world. I mean, even to the point of taking people's lives through capital punishment, all the way up. You know, you might do 6 months, you might do a year, you might do 20 years, you might do 5 life sentences. I mean, it's unforgiving what the world can lead to. I mean, that's just in terms of criminal justice. I mean, there's all kinds of other things. So, and in this world that we're talking about, that we just looked at with regard to the prodigal son, there's no negative consequence for the son who comes back. And the older brother can't understand it. He's like, what? Why are there no consequences for him? He's a screw up. So, again, my mind wrestles with these two different sort of worlds. Any thoughts on any of that? And then we've just got a few more things in this passage, and that'll be it.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say that I feel like in a lot of these conversations, and particularly this one, a lot of the teachings are counterintuitive to mainstream culture. And one example that I love in this regard is whenever there's an atrocity that happened where, let's say, a police officer kills a young man, right? And I love it when the family comes out and says, we forgive him. They sometimes come out on the news and they say, you know, the world is revolting, the world is rioting. And then the family will come out and say, stop the riots. You know, there's nothing that will get our son back. We forgive him. Let's just, you know, have peace. And that's not to say that protesting isn't effective, but there's this kind of counterintuitive love that is actually stronger than violence and hate and grievances and all that. So that's one example that I really love. Also, in the case of the prodigal son, like you said, let's say today, in today's culture, if the parents, you know, were talking to their friends, they go to lunch with their friends. Oh, our son came back. Oh, the one that asked for all the inheritance. Oh, what did you do? You know, the advice that their friends would give them of how to deal with it would be so opposite of what they actually did. And so I think it's good that the Course makes this point to say, don't get it twisted, thinking that the laws of politeness that we have in this world are anything close to what true unconditional love looks like. Because just because the law says, you know, you can't murder, you can't, you know, rape, that doesn't mean that we have a moral ethic agape code in our worldly laws. So it's totally separate. Even though we have some things that are morally just, it's nowhere near the type of unconditional love that we could have. And then, of course, you have to balance this out with, not getting, not hating the world, as you said, not getting all walked over in this life and becoming a doormat. So, but yeah, just tapping into this power. It might be counterintuitive.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. That's a perfect setup, Brittany, for this next thing. I think you'll see. I'm going to let this next paragraph be a commentary on what you just said, right? So it says in paragraph 6, it says, today we practice making free your mind of all the laws you think you must obey, of all the limits under which you live, and all the changes that you think are part of human destiny. Today we take the largest single step to sports requests in your advance towards this established goal, right? This is so what you were saying. Like, there are all these rules of how you must engage if your family member got slaughtered by the police, and it's legitimate. It's within your rights according to the legal code to do all the things you're going to do. But when sometimes people step out of that, it's profound. To your point, and that's what this section is saying, right? This whole lesson is an invitation to step out of all the rules of the world that limit us in the long run. And I don't mean to make this too political, and we generally try to stay away from it. And somebody might not like this example, and I understand, and forgive me for using it if it doesn't appeal to you. But Nelson Mandela, for instance, right, in his heyday after his release, I mean, the world couldn't get enough of him, because after 27 years in prison chipping rocks on Robben Island as a political prisoner under apartheid, he came out and preached forgiveness as a black man towards his white, what do you call them, prisoners, or whatever the word is. So, I mean, his stature as a world leader was off the charts because, again, it's the same, we're in the same territory. People could not understand how almost half of his life had been wasted in a prison setting, chipping rocks. For no, I mean, here's a man of stature and intellect and leadership, and he came out preaching forgiveness towards those people. It was just amazing. Anyway, so we're just affirming what you had just said, Brittany. And so here's the practical exercise. Each of these lessons usually has an exercise. It says, for 15 minutes twice today, escape from every law in which you now believe. Open your mind and rest. The world that seems to hold you prisoner can be escaped by anyone who does not hold it dear. Withdraw all value you have placed upon its meager offerings and senseless gifts, and let the gift of God replace them all, right? So, again, tying in the story of the prodigal son and all of that, the lesson for the younger brother was, this whole urge to go out into that world and go seek my fortune, it was the love of my father from the start. I had it. I never lost it. I could have just stayed with it instead of going in search of these random things there that seemed to promise me everything and brought me to ruin out there, right? So, again, this isn't literally talking about being a vegetable and a bump on a log. It's just talking about the psychology of the Father inside of us, that's home for us. We want to stay there. We want to treasure that. We want to connect to it. That's what makes us free. Almost done here, and then I'll check with you to see if there's anything else before we wrap up for today, Brittany. So paragraph 12 says, at least 3 times an hour, think of one who makes the journey with you and who came to learn what you must learn. And as he or she comes to mind, give them this message from yourself. I bless you, my brother or my sister, with the love of God, which I would share with you, for I would learn the joyous lesson that there is no love but God's and yours and mine and everyone's. right? So that's a nod to, in the Course, typically the relationships that we have that are troubled, right? And to your point you made a moment ago, it doesn't mean that we invite abuse from somebody who's clearly going to be abusive to us, whether at work or in our personal lives. We can have boundaries, we can separate out. And sometimes that's no easy task, actually, to do that. It's quite an accomplishment. So we don't want to take that accomplishment lightly. But psychologically, we can extend love to such a person as a prodigal from the position of the father. And that actually is just really good karma. That's the bottom line of what this is saying. It will bless us. Most people know, they say, well, if you don't forgive somebody, then you get victimized twice. You get victimized by what they did the first time, and then you get victimized by your hatred for them, right? This is saying something on the positive side, which is not only do you leave the victimization behind, but you actually create an enormous freedom for your oneself. All right. Any thoughts about any of this for you, Brittany?
And I would argue there's even a third victimization, according to our lesson, Let Miracles Replace All Grievances. So you have the original victimization, then you have the pain of feeling victimized, and then you have all the miracles in the future that you don't even know that you're missing out of, even if the pain, the victimization has subsided in the background. If you haven't replaced those grievances with forgiveness, then you don't even know all of the continuous victimization you're being subjected to. So that's my thought on that. But
excellent,
yeah.
Excellent opportunity cost that works there. It's like,
Yeah.
all the that's really profound. That's excellent. Yes, beautiful. Thank you for that. So true.
Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to add to that last bit. I think it sums it up beautifully. The exercise, very practical here. The meditation, if you want to call it that. I think that's great. I love ending with these little practical assignments so that anyone watching can take this into their own hands and see what they can get out of it in their quiet time, in their quiet space. But thanks again, everyone, for watching. It's always a pleasure hosting this show with you, Dave, and thanks again for chatting with me again this month. And I'll see you in September.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Brittany. Thank you for co-hosting with me and interviewing. And we do love comments. We love your feedback. If you have substantive questions, you can ask them next to the videos, or you can email either one of us. You can find us on our links in the show notes. So yeah, thank you so much, Brittany. Great show. I love it. And we've got 2 more on love, September and October. And then I'm looking forward to the pivot to our new theme, Miracles, for 2023. Yeah. So thank you. Have a great month. And I look forward to seeing you next month, Brittany.
All right. Likewise. Bye, Dave.
Bye.